There was joy in the bosom of Ben Raymond. He sang as he hoed in the field. He cheerfully worked overtime and his labors did not make him tired. When the quitting horn blew he executed a double shuffle as he shouldered his hoe and started for his cabin. While the other men dragged wearily over the ground he sprang along as if all day long he had not been bending over the hoe in the hot sun, with the sweat streaming from his face in rivulets. And this had been going on for 2 months now, 2 happy months, ever since Viney had laid her hand in his, and answered with a coquettish "yes," and the master had given his consent, his blessing and a $5 bill. It had been a long and trying courtship, that is, it had been trying for Ben, because Viney loved pleasure and hungered for attention and the field was full of rivals. She was a merry girl and a pretty one. No one could dance better. No girl on the place was better able to dress her dark charms to advantage or to show them off more temptingly. The toss of her head was an invitation and a challenge in one, and the way she smiled back at them over her shoulder set the young men's heads dancing and their hearts throbbing. So her suitors were many. But through it all Ben was patient, unflinching and faithful, and finally, after leading him a life full of doubt and suspense, the coquette surrendered and gave herself into his keeping. She was maid to her mistress, but she had time, nevertheless, to take care of the newly whitewashed cabin in the quarters to which Ben took her. And it was very pleasant to lean over and watch him at work making things for the little house, a chair from a barrel and a wonderful box of shelves to stand in the corner. And she knew how to say merry things, and later outside his door Ben would pick his banjo and sing low and sweetly in the musical voice of his race. Altogether such a honeymoon there had never been. For once the old women hushed up their prophecies of evil, although in the beginning they had shaken their wise old turbaned heads and predicted that marriage with such a flighty creature as Viney could come to no good. They had said among themselves that Ben would better marry some good, solid-minded, strong-armed girl who would think more about work than about pleasures and coquetting. "I 'low, honey," an old woman had said, "she'll mek his heart ache many a time. She'll comb his haid wid a 3-legged stool an' brush it wid de broom." Putty, is she? "You ma'y huh 'cause she's putty. Ky she fix you. Putty women fu' putty tricks." And the old hag smacked her lips over the spice of malevolence in her words. Some women, and they are not all black and ugly, never forgive the world for letting them grow old. But, in spite of all the prophecies to the contrary, 2 months of unalloyed joy had passed for Ben and Viney, and to night the climax seemed to have been reached. Ben hurried along, talking to himself as his hoe swung over his shoulder. "Kin I do it?" he was saying. "Kin I do it?" Then he would stop his walk and his cogitations would bloom into a mirthful chuckle. Something very pleasant was passing through his mind. As he approached, Viney was standing in the door of the little cabin, whose white sides with green Madeira clambering over them made a pretty frame for the dark girl in her print dress. The husband bent double at sight of her, stopped, took off his hat, slapped his knee, and relieved his feelings by a sounding "hoo-wee." "What's de mattah wid you, Ben? You ac' lak you mighty happy. Bettah come on in hyeah an' git yo' suppah 'fo' hit gits col'." For answer the big fellow dropped the hoe, and seizing the slight form in his arms, swung her around until she gasped for breath. "Oh, Ben," she shrieked, "you done tuk all my win'." "Dah now," he said, letting her down, "dat's what you gits fu' talkin' sassy to me. Nevah min', I'm gwine to fix you fu' dat fus' time I gits de chanst. See ef I don't." "What you gwine do? Gwine to pizen me?" "Worse'n dat." "Wuss'n dat? What you gwine to fin' any wusser'n pizenin' me, less'n you conjure me?" "Still worse'n dat." I'm going to leave you." "Uh-huh. No, you ain't. 'Cause any place you'd go you wouldn't no more git there twell you'd turn aroun' aller a sudden an' say, 'Why, dat's Ben,' an' dar I'd be." They chattered on like children while she was putting supper on the table and he was laving his hot face in the basin beside the door. "I got great news for you," he said as they sat down. "I bet you ain't got nothin' of de kin'." "All right. Den dey ain't no use in me tryin' to 'vince you. I'd jes' be wastin' my bref." "Go on. Tell me, Ben." "Uh huh. You bet I ain't, an' ef I tell you you lose de bet." "I don't keer. Ef you don't tell me, den I know you ain't got no news wuth tellin'." "Ain't got no news wuth tellin'. Whoo ee!" He came near choking on a gulp of coffee, and again his knees suffered from the pounding of his great hands. "How come you so full of laugh to night?" she asked, laughing with him. "How you 'spect I gwine tell you dat less'n I tell you my secret?" "Well, den, go on. Tell me yo' secret." "Uh huh. You done bet it ain't wuth tellin'." "I don't keer what I bet. I want to hyeah it now. Please, Ben, please." Listen how she beg. "Well, I gwine tell you now. I ain't gwine tease you no mo'." She bent her head forward expectantly. "I had a talk wid Mas'r Raymond to day," resumed Ben. "Yes?" "An' he say he pay me all my back money fu' ovahtime." "Oh!" "An' all I gits right along he gwine he'p me save, an' when I git $400 he gwine gi' me free papahs fu' you, my little gal." "Oh, Ben, Ben, hit ain't so, is it?" "Yes, it is. Den you be your own ooman. Leas'ways, less'n you wants to be mine." She went and put her arms around his neck. Her eyes were sparkling and her lips quivering. "You don't mean, Ben, dat I'll be free?" "Yes, you'll be free, Viney. Den I's gwine to set to work an' buy my free papahs." "Oh, can you do it? Can you do it? Can you do it?" "Kin I do it?" he repeated. He stretched out his arm, with the sleeve rolled up to the shoulder, and curved it upward till the muscles stood out like great knots of oak. Then he opened and shut his fingers, squeezing them together until the joints cracked. "Can I do it?" He looked down on her calmly and smiled simply, happily. She threw her arms around his waist and sank on her knees at his feet sobbing. "Ben, Ben, my Ben, I nevah even thought of it. It seemed so far away, but now we're goin' to be free, free, free." He lifted her up gently. "It's goin' to take a powerful long time," he said. "I don't keer," she cried gaily. "We know it's comin' an' we kin wait." The woman's serious mood had passed as quickly as it had come, and she spun around the cabin, executing a series of steps that set her husband agrin with admiration and joy. And so Ben began to work with renewed vigor. He had found a purpose in life and there was something for him to look for beyond dinner, a dance, and the end of the day. He had always been a good hand, but now he became a model. No shirking, no shiftlessness. And because he was so earnest his master did what he could to help him. Numerous little plans were formulated whereby the slave could make or save a precious dollar. Viney, too, seemed inspired by a new hope. And if this little house had been pleasant to Ben, nothing now was wanting to make it a palace in his eyes. Only one sorrow he had, and that one wrung hard at his great heart. No baby came to them, but instead he made a great baby of his wife, and went on his way hiding his disappointment the best he could. The banjo was often silent now, for when he came home his fingers were too stiff to play, but sometimes, when his heart ached for laughter of a child, he would take down his old friend and play low, soothing melodies until he found rest and comfort. Viney had once tried to console him by saying that had she had a child it would have taken her away from her work, but he had only answered, "We could 'a' stood that." But Ben's patient work and frugality had their reward, and it was only a little over 3 years after he had set out to do it that he put in his master's hand the price of Viney's freedom, and there was sound of rejoicing in the land. A fat shote, honestly come by, for it was the master's gift, was killed and baked, great jugs of biting persimmon beer were brought forth, and the quarters held high carnival to celebrate Viney's new found liberty. After the merrymakers had gone, and when the cabin was clear again, Ben held out the paper that had been on exhibition all evening to Viney. "Here's de document dat makes you yo' own ooman. Tek it." During all the time that it had been out for show that night the people had looked upon it with a sort of awe, as if it was possessed of some sort of miraculous power. Even now Viney did not take hold of it, but shrunk away with a sort of gasp. "No, Ben, you keep it. I can't take care no such precious thing ez that. Put it in yo' chist. Tek it an' feel of hit anyhow, so's you'll know dat you's free." She took it gingerly between her thumb and forefinger. Ben suddenly let go. "Dah now," he said, "you keep dat document. It's yo's. Keep it under yo' own responsibility." "No, no, Ben," she cried, "I jes' can't." "You mus'. Dat's de way to git used to bein' free. Whenever you looks at yo'se'f an' feels lak you ain't no different f'om what you been you tek dat paper out an' look at hit, an' say to yo'se'f, 'Dat means freedom.'" Carefully, reverently, silently, Viney put the paper into her bosom. "Now de nex' thing fu' me to do is to set out to git one o' dem papers fu' myse'f. Hit'll be a long try, 'case I can't buy mine so cheap ez I got yo's. Dough de Lawd knows why a great big ol' hunk lak me should cost mo'n a precious mossel lak you. Hit's because dey's so much of you, Ben, an' every bit of you's wuth its weight in gol'. Heish, chile, don't put my vally so high, er I'll be 'twel Jedgment Day a payin' it off." So Ben went forth to battle for his own freedom, undaunted by the task before him, while Viney took care of the cabin, doing what she could outside. Armed with her new dignity, she insisted upon her friends recognizing the change in her condition. Thus, when Mandy so far forgot herself as to address her as Viney Raymond, the new free woman's head went up and she said with withering emphasis, "Miss Viney Allen, if you please." "Viney Allen!" exclaimed her visitor. "How come you's Viney Allen now?" "'Cause I don't belong to de Raymonds no mo', an' I kin tek my own name now. Ben 'longs to de Raymonds, an' his name Ben Raymond an' you his wife. How you git roun' dat, Miss Viney Allen?" "Ben's name gwine to be Mistah Allen soon ez he gits his free papahs." "Humph, you done gone now. You naig so stiff you can't hardly bend it. I don't see how de papah mek sich a change in anybody's actions. Yo' face ain't got no whiter." "No, but I's free, an' I kin do ez I please." Mandy went forth and spread the news that Viney had changed her name from Raymond to Allen. "She Miss Viney Allen, if you please," was her comment. Great was the indignation among the older heads whose fathers and mothers and grandfathers before them had been Raymonds. The younger element was greatly amused and took no end of pleasure in repeating the new name or addressing each other by fantastic cognomens. Viney's popularity did not increase. Some rumors of this state of things drifted to Ben's ears and he questioned his wife about them. She admitted what she had done. "But Viney," said Ben, "Raymond's good enough name fu' me." "Don't you see, Ben," she answered, "dat I don't belong to de Raymonds no mo', so I ain't Viney Raymond. Ain't you gwine to change when you git free?" "I don't know. I talk 'bout dat when I's free, an' freedom's a mighty long, weary way off yet. Everybody dat's free has dey own name, an' I ain't never gwine feel free's long ez I's a totin' aroun' de Raymonds' name." "Well, change den," said Ben, "but wait untel I kin change wid you." Viney tossed her head, and that night she took out her free papers and studied them long and carefully. She was incensed at her friends that they would not pay her the homage that she felt was due her. She was incensed at Ben because he would not enter into her feelings about the matter. She brooded upon her fancied injuries, and when a chance for revenge came she seized upon it eagerly. There were 2 or 3 free Negro families in the vicinity of the Raymond place, but there had been no intercourse between them and the neighboring slaves. It was to these people that Viney now turned in anger against her own friends. It first amounted to a few visits back and forth, and then, either because the association became more intimate or because she was instigated to it by her new companions, she refused to have anything more to do with the Raymond servants. Boldly and without concealment she shut the door in Mandy's face, and hearing this, few of the others gave her a similar chance. Ben remonstrated with her, and she answered him, "No, suh, I ain't gwine to 'sociate wid slaves, I's free." "But you cuttin' out yo' own husban'." "Dat diff'ent, I's jined to my husban'." And then petulantly, "I do wish you'd hurry up an' git yo' free papahs, Ben." "Dey'll be a long time a comin'," he said, "years from now. Maybe I bettah got mine fust." She looked up at him with a quick, suspicious glance. When she was alone again she took her papers and carefully hid them. "I's free," she whispered to herself, "an' I don' 'spect to nevah be a slave no mo'." She was further excited by the moving North of one of the free families with which she had been associated. The immigrants had painted glowing pictures of the El Dorado to which they were going, and now Viney's only talk in the evening was of the glories of the North. Ben would listen to her unmoved, until one night she said, "You ought to go North when you get yo' papahs." And then he answered her with kindling eyes, "No, I won't go Nawth. I was born an' raised in de Souf, an' in de Souf I stay ontwell I die. Ef I have to go Nawth to enjoy my freedom, I won't have it. I'll quit wo'kin' fu' it." Ben was positive, but he felt uneasy, and the next day he told his master of the whole matter, and Mr. Raymond went down to talk to Viney. She met him with a determination that surprised and angered him. To everything he said to her she made but one answer: "I's got my free papahs, an' I's a goin' Nawth." Finally her former master left her with the remark, "Well, I don't care where you go, but I'm sorry for Ben. He was a fool for working for you. You don't half deserve such a man." "I won't have him long," she flung after him with a laugh. The opposition with which she had met seemed to have made her more obstinate, and in spite of all Ben could do, she began to make preparations to leave him. The money for the chickens and eggs had been growing and was to have gone toward her husband's ransom, but she finally sold all her laying hens to increase the amount. Then she calmly announced to her husband, "I's got enough money an' I's a goin' Nawth next week. You kin stay down hyeah an' be a slave ef you want to, but I's a goin' Nawth." "Even ef I wanted to go Nawth, you know I ain't half paid out yit." "Well, I can't help it. I can't spend all de bes' part o' my life down hyeah whar dey ain't no 'vantages." "I reckon dey's 'vantages everywhere fu' anybody dat wants to wo'k." "Yes, but what kin' o' wages does you git?" "Why, de Johnsons say dey had a lettah f'om Mis' Smif an' dey's gittin' along fine in de Nawth." "The Johnsons ain't goin'?" "Si Johnson is." Then the woman stopped suddenly. "Oh, hit's Si Johnson, huh? He ain't goin' wid me. He's jes' goin' to see dat I git sta'ted right aftah I git thaih." "Hit's Si Johnson?" he repeated. "'Tain't," said the woman, "hit's freedom." Ben got up and went out of the cabin. "Men's so suspicious," she said. "I ain't goin' Nawth 'cause Si's a goin'. I ain't." When Mr. Raymond found out how matters were really going he went to Ben where he was at work in the field. "Now look here, Ben," he said, "you're one of the best hands on my place and I'd be sorry to lose you. I never did believe in this buying business from the first, but you were so bent on it that I gave in. But before I'll see her cheat you out of your money, I'll give you your free papers now. You can go North with her and you can pay me back when you find work." "No," Ben replied doggedly. "Ef she cain't wait fu' me she don't want me, an' I won't roll her aroun' an' be in de way." "You're a fool," said his master. "I loves huh," said the slave. And so this plan came to naught. Then came the night on which Viney was getting together her belongings. Ben sat in a corner of the cabin silent, his head bowed in his hands. Every once in a while the woman cast a half frightened glance at him. He had never once tried to oppose her with force, though she saw that grief had worn lines into his face. The door opened and Si Johnson came in. He had just dropped in to see if everything was all right. He was not to go for a week. "Let me look at yo' free papahs," he said, for Si could read and liked to show off his accomplishment at every opportunity. He stumbled through the formal document to the end, reading at the last, "This is a present from Ben to his beloved wife, Viney." She held out her hand for the paper. When Si was gone she sat gazing at it, trying in her ignorance to pick from the, to her, senseless scrawl those last words. Ben had not raised his head. Still she sat there, thinking, and without looking her mind began to take in the details of the cabin. That box of shelves there in the corner Ben had made in the first days they were together. Yes, and this chair on which she was sitting. She remembered how they had laughed over its funny shape before he had padded it with cotton and covered it with a piece of linsey old Miss had given him. The very chest in which her things were packed he had made, and when the last nail was driven he had called it her trunk, and said she should put her finery in it when she went traveling like white folks. She was going traveling now, and Ben, there he sat across from her in his chair, bowed and broken, his great shoulders heaving with suppressed grief. Then, before she knew it, Viney was sobbing, and had crept close to him and put her arms around his neck. He threw out his arms with a convulsive gesture and gathered her up to his breast, and the tears gushed from his eyes. When the first storm of weeping had passed Viney rose and went to the fireplace. She raked forward the coals. "Ben," she said, "hit's been these plaguin' free papahs. I want you to see 'em bu'n." "No, no," he said. But the papers were already curling, and in a moment they were in a blaze. "There," she said, "there now, Viney Raymond." Ben gave a great gasp, then sprang forward and took her in his arms and kicked the packed chest into the corner. And that night singing was heard from Ben's cabin and the sound of the banjo. Story 3